Hello friend, how are you? Welcome to Tripan Study Center. Today we are going to do the chapter of social science and highlighting each and every point of it. Let's see what is our topic today. Popular stands to be the British rule. There is a most important chapter. And the first point arrive here, the earlier popular stance movement against the canonical rules. There is a time period here 1750 to 1857. There is a most important period time here. Can you think of reason why this resistance movement are called popular? There is a most important question here. Why there is the resistance movement are called popular? Was it is because of the large number of people who participate in them? That is a why there is because of the large number of people who participate in this them. And our was is the because the causing by a meet of with. There is a many question arrive in your mind, but after reading the section you will be able to arrive at the conclusion. There is important. The first point here, cases of popular distance movement. There is a most important question here and point also. Why do people resist? Why do people resist? They resist when there is a feel that their right are being taken away. That means all resistance movements start against some from exploitations. And British rule was the policy had undermined right, status and economic position of Indian symbolize this exploitation. There is a most important thing of the British ruler. The protest and resistance was mainly offered by their displaced running classes and peasantries and tribals. For example, when a warrant is a hostings and attack to Banaras and imprisoned king is chasing things to be fulfilled his unjustified and demand of many an army, the people Banaras is rebelled. In a Madras or a presidency, polygarchs is rebelled, and when the British tried to the snatch away there is a military and land right. Interference in the religious parties was another case of this popular rebellions. There is a most important rebellions here, religious practice. And other than revolt were the anti-Christians, which was due to the social religious reform introduced by the British, which were unacceptable to the people. There's an important point here. The social religious reform introduced by the British, which were unstable to be a people. In some other rebellions, difference between two religions of the rulers and exploited a class is become an immediate case for the rebellion. There's important religious reasons, and this happened to the Mapila rebellions and Malabar region. And here the Muslim peasantry is a fought against their Hindu landlord and many lender. In the next section, we shall be about the nature of this moment. The next point is the most important arrive here. Nature of popular distance movement. Nature of popular distance movement here. Violence and plunder were is the two most popular tools used by the rebels to express their resistance against their purposer. There is the most important violence and plunder. Lower and exploited class are often attacked their exploiter. There where is a Britisher or the Jamidar or the revenue collected officially and wealthy group and the individual. Santhal rebellions say mass scale involence where account book of many lender and government building were burned and there is exploited punished. In the previous lesson, we are read about there is a land policy of the British. The purpose was extract as much money as possible from the peasant and tribal people. And this caused so much unrest among the peasant and tribal that has started expressing there is a resentment against the British. There is a most important here nature of popular resistance movement. It is important to note that is a popular resistance movement aimed at the restorations of all statures and relations, which has been done away with by the British. And each social group had its own reason to be arise in a voice against their colonial powers. For example, the place of Jamidar and rulers want to be designed, there is a land and state. Similarly, the travels group is a rebel because they did not want to trade and money lender to interference in their lives. Our next topic is important here, pace and movement and travels the world in the 19th century. There is a most important moment on this period time here. The peasant means farmer movement and travels the world in 19th century. You know that you would be surprised to know that beginning with the sannyasi rebellings and Chor uprising of Bengal and Bihar in the 1760s, and there was hardly a year without any army position from there 1763 to 1856. There was more than 40 major rebellions apart from 100 of minor ones. There are 40 major rebellions and 100 of minor ones. And these rebellions were, however, locals in a character and effects. They were isolated from each other because each rebellion has a different motive. We will be now read more about this moment in the next section of this lesson. Here show the most important map of here 1767 to 1857. There is a Veal, Jantia, Indo-Santhal, Kol Mundra, Kal Sanyas, and Mapila, Peligara. There is a most important moment slot on your screen in the map. First topic arrive here, peasant revolt, means farmer revolt. In an area lesson, you read about their various land settlement and the vast effect they had on the Indian peasantry. The permanent settlement had made to the Jamidar the owner of the land, but this land could be a short of it if a fail to pay the revenue on time. There is a fail revenues on the time, and this forced the Jamidar and the landlord to extract money from their peasants, even if there is a crops failed. There is a peasant even if their crops fail, and these peasants often is borrowed is the money from there is a money lender who were also called to the Mahajans. The impoverished peasant could be never pay back this borrowed money, and this led to money hardship like a stem their poverty and began forced to be worked as bonded laborers. Hence, the lowers and the exploited classes often to attack their exploiters, and failure to play by the Jamidar also mean that the land would be taken away by the British. The British then would be actions this land to be higher border. There is a highest border, and who often come from the urban area. The new Jamidar from the cities had little or no interest in the land, and they did not invest money in a seed and fertilizer to improve the fertilizers of the land, but only carried to be collect as much revenue as they could. And this proves the extractivity for the peasant who remained to backward and stagnant. To get out of situation, the peasant now started to producing a commercial crop like indigo, sugarcane, jute, cotton, opiums, and so on it. This was the beginning of the commercialization of agriculture. That is the beginning of here a commercialization of agriculture. The peasants now depended on the merchant, traders, and middlemen to sell their product during to the harvest time. As they shifted to the commercially, crop, food, grain production went to down, and less food stock and led to the famines. It was therefore not surprising that the hungry peasant revolted. Let us read more about there some peasants revolt which took place on the account of the British policies. First year, the Fakir and Sannyasi rebellion. The Fakir and Sannyasi rebellion. The 1770, 1820th centuries. The establishment of the British controller over Bengal after 1757 and lead to increase in a land revenue and the exploitation of the peasant. The Bengal famine of 1770 led to peasants whose their land were confiscated, displaced and zamindars and disbanded soldiers and poor to become together in a rebellion. They were joined by the sannyasi and fakir. The fakirs were a group of wandering Muslim religious and mendicant in Bengal. The famous Hindu leader who is supported them were Bhavani Pathaks and the woman Devi Chaudharani. They attacked English factories and seized there is the goods, cash, arms and ammunition. Madhum Shah, the Madhum Shah was one of their prominent leaders and they were finally both under control by the British at the beginning of the 19th century. The Sannyasi uprising took a place of Bengal between to the period of 1770 to 1820. The Sannyasi rose is a rebellion after the great famine of 1770 in the Bengal, which the Kosi actually chose as a ministry. And however, the immediate causing of the rebellion was the restriction imposed by the British upon pilgrims visiting the holy place among the both Hindu and Muslims. The next year, the Indigo rebellions. There are Indigo rebellions. There is a time period here 1859 to 1862. The British adopted many ways thought they could be increase their profit, and they also started interfering with their basis of means of livelihood of a people. Not only there is introduced new crop, they also is about new techniques of farming. Heavy pressure was put on their jamidar and peasant to pay high taxes and grow commercial crop. One such a commercial crop was indigo. Indigo is here a commercial crop, and the cultivation of indigo was determined by the need of English cloth market. The indigo used here a need for the English cloth market, and they discounted of the farmer growing to indigo was mainly for three reasons. First reason here, there was a very low prices for growing indigo. Second here, indigo was not a lucrative as it was planted at the same time a food crop, and loss of fertility of soil because of planting indigo. There is a most important three reason for the farmers growing to indigos here. Here show the most important Bengal's map. The area of indigo revolt in a Bengal 1859 to 62. The Malda, Rajshahi, Pahana, Dakkas, Nadia, and so this is the most important part here. The area of indigo revolt in a Bengal. As a result, food stock are decline. There is a food stock decline. The peasants suffering at the hand of the trader and the middleman of who there is a dependent to the sell their good and sometime at a very low price because their land is a loss of fertility and there is the growing of indigo crop. They supported the Jamidar to maintain their dominance and the deals with their problem in administering those areas. The peasants launched a movement for a non-cultivation of indigo in Bengal. Here, peasant farmers launched the movement of non-cultivations of indigo in Bengal. Hindu and Muslim peasants together went to on strike and the failed case against the planter. and they were supported by the press and missionaries. There is supported here press and missionaries. The government passed order to the November 1860 notified that will be illegal to force the rare to be cultivated of indigo, and this marked the victory for the rebel. In this picture on your screen, the indigo cultivation Bengal. The indigo cultivation Bengal show unique picture. There is a most important indigo. The indigo used are the many making of cloth of England factories. The next year for us is moment. There is a period time here 1838 to 1848, and this was the first ever no tax campaigns against the British government led by the Siristullah Khan and Dadu Men. There is a band of the volunteers fought heroically with their armed group of indigo planter and Jamidar. It's brought together all the cultivators of Bengal against the tyrannies and illegal extraction by the landlords. The next moment here, Wahhabi movement. Wahhabi movement, there is a time period here, 1830 to 1860. The leader of movement was Sahir Ahmad Varalibi, and the real Varalis, who is greatly influenced by the teaching of Abdul Behwal and Arabia Asa Balahullah and their Sant. The movement was primarily religious in its origin. It is soon assumed there is a character of the class struggle in some place, especially in Bengal. Irrespective of commercial distractions and peasant united against there is a landlord. The next point here, significance of peasant revolt. The aggressive economical policy of the British shattered the traditional agrarian system of India and worsened the condition of peasant. The peasant revolt taking place in the various parts of country were mainly or directly aid this policy. Third, this revolt were not be aimed at the uprooting the British rule from India, and they create awareness among the Indians. They now felt a need to organize and fight against the exploitations and operations. In short, these rebellions prepared the ground for a various and uprisings such as a Sikh war in Punjab and finally the revolt of 1857. Next point here, tribal revolt. Tribal revolt, there is the most important revolt here. Among the group of people who revolted against the British rule were the tribals. The tribals is a group where is important and integrated part of Indian life. Before their annexations and the subsequent as incorporations in the British territory, they had their own social and economical system. And this system were traditional and nature and satisfy their needs of the tribals. Such a community was headed by their chief who managed the affair of the community. They also enjoy the independence regarding their management of their affair. The land and the forest and their main sources of the livelihood. The forest provided them with the basic items which they required for the survive. The tribal communities remained isolated from their non-tribals. This is important. Their land forests were a main source of livelihood. The forest provided them with the basic item which they required for the survive. The British policy proved harmful to the tribal society. There is a harmful to their tribal society. This destroyed there is a relatively self-sufficient economics and communities. The tribal group of a different reason revolted against the British. This movement were anti-colonial in nature because there is a direct against colonial administration. The tribals used the traditional weapon, mainly as bow and the arrow, and for the turn to the violence. The British had the lead several with them, and they were declared criminals and antisocial. Their properties was the confiscated, and there was imprisoned it. There are many of them were hanged. The travels is a moment in the Indians remained the confined to some reasons only, but it did not be lag behind other social group as a regard of participation in the anti-colonial movements. We shall be now read about there are some major travels revolt that took place against the British rule. Come and see here. The first year, the Santhal rebellions. The Santhal rebellions, there's a period time 1855 to 57. The area of a concentration of the Santhals was called Daman-e-Khol and Santhal Pargana. Santhal Pargana it is extended from to the Bhagalpur in the Bihar in the north to be Orissa in the south, stretching from the Hazaribagh to be there is the border of Bengal. The Santhal, like other tribes, is working hard to maintain there is a live in the forest and wild jungle. They cultivated the land and lived to a peaceful life which is continued till there are British officials and bowed them to leaders as a money launder and jamidar and merchant. There is made to buy good on the crate and forced to pay a back with a heavy interest during the harvesting time. As a result, whereas sometimes force a giver Mahajan not only their crops but also plug to the bulk and the finally their land. Their plug of bulk and the finally their land. Very soon, they because a bonded is a laborers and there could be served only there is a creator. The peaceful travels community were now up in arm against the British official, Jamidar and many lender who were exporting them. And Siddh and Kanu were leading a Santhal rebel leaders. There are Siddhu and Kanu were leading a Santhal rebel leaders. They give a heroic fight of the British government. Unfortunately, their Santhal rebellion was crushed in an equal battle, but it became a source of inspirations for a future against struggles. On your screen, there is a most important that travels rebellions. There is the Tirka Manjui. Tirka Manjui, the most important tribe revolted here. And the second year, Munda rebellions. Munda rebellion, there is one most important tribe revolt here. 1899 to 90, one of the most important and prominent rebellions which took place after 1857 was the Munda rebellion. The Mundas are traditionally enjoy created right as the original clearance of the forest, which was not given to be other tribes. But this land system was getting destroyed in their hands of their merchant and money lender, the long before the coming of the British. But when the British actually come into this area, they help it to be destroy this system with the rapid pace when they induce a contractor and traders. And this contractor and needed to people to work with them and is the indentures of their labors. Indentures of labor and these are discolation the mundas and the hand of the British and their contractor and give the birth to be a Munda rebellion. There is a Munda rebellions. The most prominent leader of the rebellions was Virsa Munda, who was more aware than the other as had received some education from the missionaries. He encouraged their tribes people to keep the tradition of worshipping of the scarecrows alive. This move was very important to the prevent the Britisher and from taking over their wasteland. For this, Virsa Munda is a fought against their money lender, Mahajan, and English official. He attacked police station, churches, and missionaries. There is the most important rebellion here, Munda rebellion. There is attack the police station, churches, and missionaries. Unfortunately, there is a rebel where is affected and Munda died in a prison some after in the 19th century. But this sacrifice did not be go in vain. The Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act of 1908 provided to some land ownership right to people and ban a bonded labor of the tribal. And Virsa Munda became to the architects of Munda rebellions and somebody who is remembered even today. On your screen, there is the most important rebellions, Virsa Munda. Virsa Munda is the most important person on the rebellion of their British ruler. The next year, Janata and Garo rebellions. There is the most important year, Janata and Garo rebellion. There is a period of time, sir, 1860 to 1870s. After the first Anglo-Burmese war, the British planned to the construction of the road connected to the Brahmaputra Valley at present day Assam. There is a present Assam with the satellite of present day of Bangladesh. The Janthais and the Goras is the northern eastern part of India and present day is a Meghalaya. Opposed the construction of this road which was strategic of important to the British for the movement of troops. In 1827, the Janthas tried to stop work and soon their unrest spread to be a Navorings and Garos Hill, alarming the British born several Janthas and Garo villages. The hostilities increased with the introduction of house tax and income tax by the British in the 1860s. On your screen, there is the most important Ukinga Non-Goba Memorial. That is the most important on this period time here. The next year, the uprising of the wheel. The uprising of the wheel, there is a two class here. The 1818 to 1813, the wheels were largely concentrated the Khanades and other present there Maharashtra and Gujarat. Khanades, there is the most important state, Maharashtra and Gujarat. Khanades has come under to the British occupation in 1880. 1818, the Wheels is considered them as an outsider. On the instigations of Prima Bhukis is a Labour's Minister of Bazairo. Bazairo is their second and they revolted against their Britisher. This is important. And the next year, the Coal Uprising. Coal Uprising is 1831 to 1832. The cause of Sikhabhaum and the Chota Nagpur are area enjoyed the autonomies under their chief, but the entry of the British threatened their independence. Later, the transfer of travels as a lands and the coming of the moneylender. The merchant and British law create a lot of tension, and this promoted there is a call tribe to be organized as himself and rebel. The impact was such as that the British had to rush troops as formidable for of place to suppress it. And the next year, the Mapila Uprising. Mapila Uprising is 1836 to 1854. The Mapila where is the Muslims cultivating tents and landless laborers and a fisherman and the laborer as a reason the British occupation of the Malabar regions and their new land law along with there is a cities of the landlord mainly to the Hindus and lead to the Mafilas to be revolt against them and took many years for the British to crush the Mafilas. Next year, the uprising of 1857 cases and separations and consequences. There is a most important topic here. The uprising of 1857, the causes, separations and consequences here. The revolt of 1857 started on 10th May when the company as the Indian soldiers era Meerut rebelled. As called to the Sapo mutiny by the British, it is now recognized as the first war of independence against the British ruler. Indian soldier killed there is a European officer and marched to about Delhi. And they entered to the Red Fort and they proclaimed their as and powerless. Mughal Empire Bahadur Shah Zafar as the Empire of India. And this rebellion was a major anti-colonial movement against their aggressive imperialist policy of British. In fact, it was an economical, political, and social struggle against the British rule. And this served an outburst of the anger and discontent, a shock the foundation of colonial rule in the large part of India. We will now study the causes of the disunifications among the Indian people which made their rebels against their British rule. The first of all point here arrive are political cases. The political cases here, the nature of colonial expansion through the annexations become a major source of discontent among the Indian ruler. The British want to be acquire a land and collect as much a wealth for England as they could be. There is a policy of annexations called to the doctrines of lapse and subsidiaries. And the lines led to a number of independent kingdoms began annexed to be British Empire. And these were a state that were enjoyed to British protection, but their ruler has died without leaving. A nature here their horns, as a result there is adopted son could now no longer legals inherit their property or receive the pension which was granted to them by the British. In this way, Lord Dalhousie annexed there is a Maratha state of Satara as a Nagpur, and Jhansi and several there are minor kingdoms. One, the death of the Bajirao. Two, the pension granted to him was abolished and the claim of his adopted son, Nana Sahib, to receive this pension was denied to him. And this interference by the East India Company was disliked by many Indian rulers. Before the policy of the trans of the lapse, the Indian ruler had a right to be adopted and there to his the throne even if there was a childless, but now they had to be take periods with a consent from the British. Here show the Indian map. There is a most important for here. The Maruti, Delhi, Bareilly, Lucknow, Fizabad, Kanpur and Jhansi. There is a most important spot of revolt. That's important here in the map. The policy organization affected not only the rulers but affected all those who were dependent upon them, namely soldiers, craft people, and even the nobles. That's important here. Even there is traditional scholarship to the prestige or classes lost the Pentagon and which there is where is getting from this ruler. Thousands of Jamidar, noble and pilgrims is lost control over their land and its revenues. The organization of the Awadh on the ground of misgovernment was also resented by their Nawab who was loyal to be a British, and no alternative job were provided to the people who lost their jobs and when the British look over Awadh. Even the peasant had to pay of higher taxes and additional land revenue. The continued interference of the British in the basic way of the living, traditional belief and value of norms was even there is the masses as the threat of their religions. The British administration gradually became arrogant and the wolf between them and the people within. That is important. The next point here, economical cases. There is a most important point here. Another important case of the revolt was the disruptions of the traditional Indian economy, and it is a subordinate of the British economy. The British had come to trade with India but soon decided to exploit and impoverish the country, and they tried to take away as much wealth and raw material from here and they could. The Britishers keep high posts and salaries for themselves. They use a political control to increase their trade as well as export and import of foreign goods. All men were used to be drain India of their wealth. Indian economies now suffer under the British policy. Since there is a blockade against the interest of Indian trade and industry, India is a handicraft completely a collapse. That is the India's handicraft completely collapsed, and that a craft man who received a royal pensionings were impoverished when the state were annexed. They could not be complete with the British factor made a product where machines were used. It made India into an excellent consumer of British good and a rich supply of raw material for the industry in England. The British sold the cheap machine made cloth in India which destroyed the Indian cottage industries. There is important, there is a destroyer for their Indian cottage industry. It also left a million of craftsmen unemployed. The British also sent raw material to England for the factories there, and this left a little for the Indian weavers. The British also imposed heavier duty on Indian made goods. Now there could be reaps of hugs profit as there was no competition for their goods. Thus the British drained to Indian here of wealth and here natural resources. And what are the measures the British take to be exploit India? To buy raw materials and sell their finished goods, they introduce stamp ships and railways. The railways is open as a vast market to the British and facilitated their export of Indian raw materials aboard. The railways connected the raw material producing area with the exporting port. As a result, British goods afforded their Indian market. But you know that the railways is a play an important role in the national awakening of the country too. They let a people an idea come closer together and something that the British had never anticipated. In 1853, Dalhousie opened their first telegraph line from Calcutta to Agra, and they also introduced their postal service to India. Since land was the major source of revenue from them, the British thought of the various means to get a revenue from land. The colonial policy of intensifying land revenue demand led to a large number of peasants losing their land to revenue farmer, trader, and money lenders. And this was done through the Royatwari and Mahavari system. There is this time the two systems established here, Ratwaris and Mahavari system. The permanent settlement of Bengal, Bihar, Orissa did not recognize their heredity or right of peasant on the land. On the other hand, if you there fail to pay a 10 of 11th of the entire produce, their property could be sold off. Their property is sold off. To prevent the situation, the peasants often borrow the money from their money lender at the high rate of interest, and sometimes they even sold their property to be a money lender. Even the official harsher the peasant who dared not seek justice at the court from a fear of further harassment. The new class of Zamidar that were created by the British become their political allies. The supporter them in a time of need and acted as a buffer between the British and the people. Some them even supported the British against the freedom movement. The economical decline of peasantries and artisans was reflected in the 12 major and numerous minor famines from 1770 to 1857. All this factory helped to be spread on anti-British feeling, and which ultimately is culminated in their revolt of 1857. There is important economical value for a revolt of 1857. The next year, social and religious cases. There is important. The British were not very sensitive to the feeling of vast mass of Indian people. Social reform against sati, female infanticide, and with the remarriage and education of women made many people unhappy. with an objective to be convert to people the Christian missionaries and open school and colleges. They also need a population which was educated and they are modern enough to be buy their goods, but not enough to prove to the intermediate to British interest. It's made to people believe that the government was in a coalition with their missionaries to eradicate their religions and convert them to the Christianity. And their passing of Act is a 21 of the 1850 invalid to the convert the Christianity inherit to the essential and property. The new law and the natural interpret as a concessions of the Christian and convert within the further create an exit and fear among the people. The religious is a sentiment of the supposed were hot in 1806 in the Madras presidency. The Hindus were asked to be removed their caste mark from their forehead, and the Muslims were asked them trim their beards. Though the sapists of the uprising and put down, it was evident that the visits neither understood nor a care of the Indian soldier. The loyalty of the spouses was further undermined by the container military reform which is required them to serve overseas. And this contest there is religious feeling. They had on the average vision as overseas service as a travel across the ocean mean loss of caste for them. The next year, discontent in the army. The soldier in the East India Company as an army come from a peasant families which were deeply affected by the government's policy. Indian soldiers were not given to post above that is a sub doors and some spouses is wanted special batal allowance if you send hours a duty and sometimes where is the paid but most of the time they were not. They therefore started to distrusted their officer, and this instance contribute in their own way to the revolt of 1857. The soldiers had other grievances too, and they were paid salaries less than their English counterpart. As a result, the morals of Indian sepoy was very low. On the other hand, when the soldier refused to be cross the black water, and that is ocean and sea, because the religious forbade it is the British were is a truthless of them. The next point here immediately causes. There is the most important here. The strong resentment was rising among the Indian, and they were beaten only for an occasion of revolt. The stage was all set. Only a spark was needed to be set it on fire. Introduction of the crisis in the 1857 provided that fire. The government decided to replace the old fashioned musket is a brown bags by the infield rifle. The loading process of infield rifle involved to the bring of the cartridge to the mouth and beaten off the top. There was a rumors among the spouses of January 1857, and that the grey seed cartilages is containing that fat of cow and pig. The cow is scared there is a Hindus, and the pig is for heathen to be the Muslim. The spoils where is now is convinced that introduction of grazed is a cutting ways was a deliberate and attempt that defiled Hindu and Muslim religious and their religious feeling. And this spark of the revolt of Sapos is on 29th March 1857. The next point here, the causes of the revolt here. The This is called the Mughal Pandey. There is a Sipo. This is called Mangal Pandey. Was the first soldier who opening this swell order, and he killed two English officers at the Bra Covers near Calcutta on 29 March 1857, and he was arrested and tried to executed. The regiment of Bracopores was disbanded. The new news of Mangal Pandey's very soon and this other part of country and resulted in the open revolts. Here come to picture, there is the most important person here, Mangal Pandey. Mangal Pandey is the first person in the revolt of 1857, and he was a killer too, a British officer, and arrested the British police. And there is the most important for 1857 revolt. The most decisive uprising occurring at the Meerut, where 85 sepoys of their cavalry and regiment were sentenced to be 2 to 10 year imprisonment for the refusing to use a grace is a courteous, and their very next day on the 10 May is 1857, and three regiments broke into the open mutiny. There is a kill to British officers and broke open the persons and to release their commanders. They began to march toward to Delhi, and there is were joined by the local infantry and common people. The rebels is a capture of Delhi and kill many British officers, and they declare the Mughal Empire Bahadur Shah as the Empire of India. From Delhi to revolt spread to other places. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib was declared to the Peshawar. His troops were commanded by Tatya Tope. Tatya Tope is the most important person, and Azimullah. Azimullah is also important on this period time. At the Lucknow, Begum Hazrat Mahal was assisted by the Malabis Ahmadullah. In a Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai and the Ara Kunwar Singh. Kunwar Singh is led to revolt, and Khan Bahadur Khan, and there is the leader of Bareilly. There is the most important revolt on this period time, a different part, different revolt. Here show the picture, there is the most important Hazrat Mahal. There is the most important person is a female. They take a part of the revolt of 1857. The loss of Delhi greatly lowered the prestige of British. To recover their loss and prestige, they took help to the loyal forces for Punjab. There is this time the loyal forces for the Punjab, the assault to the lasted 4 months, and Delhi was finally recaptured on 10th September 1857. It took another 10 months of fighting before the Governor General Lord Canning. There is a Governor General on this time, Lord Canning, and could be proclaimed to the end of the mutiny on 8th July 1858. There is some important, there is the end of proclaim. A steep resistance has been offered to the British force by the heroics cheers are the rebellions Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi and Tatya Tope and Kunwar Singh. Rani Lakshmi Bai led to be rebels ranks. Mounted on the horseback, she boldly is faced their British cavalry and but her horse is stampled and the field she was killed. According to British commander in chief Sir Hugh Ross, he was the best and bravest military leader of the rebels. And Kunwar Singh was killed in another battle in Bihar. And Tatya Tope was captured well, and he was asleep. He was hanged after a trial. And this was the end of the heroics trios, and the rebellion was finally surprised by the British. The All Empire Bahadur Shah, along with his two sons, was taken prisoner. After the trials, he was deported to the Rangoon, where he died in 62 at the age of 87. His son were shot dead at Delhi without a trial. He must be now look into the causes for the failure of revolts. The next year, nature of revolt. There is a nature of revolt here. A big debate surrounded revolt of 1857. The British historians describe the event of 1857 to 1858 as the immunity war, the Sepoys, and it should be a pharaohs. There is a mention there here that is there were many surprising by the Sepoys is a period to 1857. One example is the Valoris is a mention of July 1806, where Indian suppose has revolted against the East India companies and garrisons, and nevertheless, order was restored very soon, and the revolt did not go beyond of the confine of the continent. But if you look closely into the fact of 1857, you will see the difference. The revolt was started by the Sepoys but was joined to the large number of the civilians population. The participation of the peasant and artisan made the revolt is spared and the popular event. In some area, the common people revolted even before the Sepoys, and all this so that it was a clear popular revolt. It was characterized by the Hindu-Muslim unity. The unity between different religions also existed. Rebels in one part of country helped people fighting in other areas. The revolt should be seen as the first nationalist struggle in India from independent from the foreign rules. You will realize that the revolt of 1857 was not one moment but only there is a many. There was or there is realized the revolt of 1857 was not one moment but many. It was not a class revolt either. The peasants did not be rebels against the landlords. They only direct attack against two money lendings and grand leaders are the representative of the British Indian government. But their policy strongly influenced their way as a particular reasons and was going to react. The revolt in the Awadh as well as other region was popular in that it pretended to people as well and was carried out by them. Talukdar and the peasant is the Awadh is a fought together against a common foe. But there is no doubt that the revolt of 1857 was the first time that a soldier of Indian army extracted from a different communities. There is a Hindu, Muslim, landlord, peasant had come together in their oppositions to be British. It also provided their necessary foundation for their later successful anti-colonial struggle against the British. The failure of the revolt is the next topic. Is important. Failure of revolt. Although this revolt was a big event, the history of India, it had every little chance of success against an organized and powerful enemy. It was surprised within a years of the outbreak. Various cases lead to the failure of revolt of 1857. There is a of various cases. There was a no unity of purpose among their rebels. The Sepoys of the Bengal wanted to revive their ancient galleries of Mughal where the Nana Sahab and Tatya Tope and tried to re-establish their Maratha power. Rani Lakshmi Bai fought again Jhansi and which she is had lost as a result of British policy of doctrine of lapse. Secondly, this is a rising was not of spirit, its remain is a confident to the north and center India. Even in the north, Kashmir, Punjab, Sindh and Rajputana keep away from the rebels. The British is a managed to be get the loyalty of Madras and Mumbai regiment and the Sikh state. Afghans and Gorkhas also supported the British. There is an important point here. Afghan and Gorkhas also support the British, and many Indian rulers refused to help the rebels. And some were opening hostile to be them and the helped the British in a suppressing the revolt. The middle and upper classes and the modern education India as also did the not support the revolt. And thirdly, their leadership of the movement was weak. There is a thirdly is the most important. The leadership of the movement was a weak. Indian leaders is a lack to the organization and planning. There is a important. Indian leaders lacked organization and planning. The rebel leaders were not to be matched to their British soldier. Most of its leaders thought out there is their own interest, and they were motivated by narrow personal gain. The fought to be elaborate only their own territories. No national leaders is must to be a coordinate the movements and give it a purpose and their direction. The Lakshmi Bai, Tata Tops and Nana Sahab were encouraged, but there is a not good of military generals. With the escape of Nana Sahib and the death of the Bahadur Shah Jafar come the end of the Peshawar ships and their Mughal rules. The rebels were short of weapon and finance. The rebels were short of weapon and finance, and whatever few weapons existed were the old and outdated. They were no match to be sophisticated and the modern weapons of the British. The rebels were also poorly organized. The uprising in a different part of the country were uncoordinated. Of the uprising we have in their uncontrolled manner. On the other hand, the telegraphic system and postal communication helped the British to speed up their operation. The English masters of the sea enabled them to get a timely help from to the England and crush the revolt ruthlessly. Significance and impact of the revolt. There is a next topic important here. Significance and impact of the revolt. The revolt of 1857 was the first sign that the Indians want to be in the British rule and were ready to be stand united for this case. Even though they failed to be achieved, there is the objective and they succeed in the showing their seeds of nationalism among the Indians. India people become more aware of the heroes and who sacrifice is himself in the revolt. However, it was the beginning of distrust between two Hindus and Muslims, which the British later exported to continue their rule in India. And next year, the legacy of revolt. The next year, the legacy of revolt. The revolts of 1857 is unique in a sense that is a cut across the caste, communities, and class barrier. Indian people for the first time put up on field of challenge to be British rule. To have the effect of the rebels fell, the British government was pressurized to be a change their policy toward to India. In August 1858, by the Act of the Better Government of India, both the Board of Control and Board of Director were abolished, and the Office of Secretary of State India was created with on the Indian Council of 15 members to assist the Viceroys of India. And designation of earlier known as the Governor General India in August 1858, the British crowd he assumed control of India from the East India Company, and in 1877 Queen Victoria was the crowned Empress of India. This is important for in this time the 1877 Queen Victoria was the crowned as the Empress of India, and this brought to be on end of the rule of East India Company. In the proclamation of 1st November 1858 to the Queen announced a continuation of the company policies. India became a colony of British Empire. The Indian rulers were assured of their right to be succession after the adoption. The province is promised to honor all the treaties and the agreement made by the company with the rules of Indian state. By now, the British had become a distributors of the Indian Muslim unity. They decided to follow their policy of divide and rule the country. They keep a tight control over key opposition, both in the civil and military administration. To give expression to this pledged the Indian Civil Service Act of 1861 and was passed and which provide to the annual competitive examination to held on London for a requirement of the coveted civil service. That is the most important here. The revolt played a pivotal role in the Anglo-Indian history. The British became continued their defensives about their empire, while the many Indians remained better and would be never trust their rule again. It was not until the emergence of Indian National Congress in 1885 and Mahatma Gandhi that India regretted there is a movement for home or rules. One group which keep away from to the travels and opposition to be a British was the English educated India. The English educated India, there is important things here, and these groups are when it's a rise to be a condition of the new rule. And some of its members were a descendant of the new Bengali Jamidars, a class created by the permanent settlement in Bengal. It is crucial to be noted that some member of this entire group returned against the British and some 30 and 40 years after the revolt, in 1857. The army had been mainly responsible for the crisis of 1857. Hence, the radical change were introduced in the army. The strength of European troops in India was increasing. A number of Indian troops reduced from the pre-1857 figure. All India Artillery is a units with their expansion of new and few mountains batters and were disbanded. Better thereby or disbanded even there is a artillery and keep with the British soldier. On the other hand, there was a attempt to be paid native against the natives on the basis of the caste, religions and reasons. All the big posts in their army and the revenue department were reserved for the European. And there was a mutual distrust and the fear of between the Indian and the British. It was increasingly realized that one basis case of the revolt of 1857 was a lack of contact between the rulers and the ruled. And thus the humble beginning to award there is a development of representative institution in India was made by the Indian Counseling Act of 1861. The emotionally after effect of the revolt whereas there are most unfortunate and radical of bitterness and sharply there is a war as a legacy of struggle.